satellite and you read it off Google Maps. It's I actually kind of resent science these days. It seems to be so much easier than when I was in the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, as an author, you have to kind of take what you know and then what you're learning, and because I assume you're always learning, and kind of put that on the page and make it readable for people who aren't scientists and things like that. And that was one of the things that I think that you had always tried to press, is that you don't have to be a scientist to do science fiction, but I assume it helps, right?
Yeah, I think it helps in some ways. I think in other ways it's actually more of an impediment than a benefit. I actually gave a talk a while back called "Why Science Fiction is Too Important to Be Left to the Scientists," and things may be changing these days, but certainly when I was coming up through the ranks, you essentially had any slight element of style or lyricism hammered out of your prose. You were supposed to be just the facts man, right? You couldn't say that you did something. You had to say that something was done. You had to be passive all the time. They did actual experiments where they would submit papers that were really badly worded and opaque and obfuscatory and just really full of badly constructed sentences. And then they would submit the same paper after it had been sort of cleaned up and was easy for everyone to understand. And the more badly written paper appeared in the higher rated journal. The argument simply being because when a reviewer reads a paper and it's well written, the immediate reaction is to think, well, that's perfectly clear. I mean, I may not have thought of it myself, but it's self-evident, so it's nothing special. Whereas if you can't understand every third word, it's like, wow, this guy's way beyond me. He must be really smart. There's that. Plus, there's what we talked about before, the dogma. When you're in the 21st century scientific field, you sometimes forget that there's going to be a 22nd century of the same field. And you're invested in looking at certain models and so on and certain paradigms. And I think that may limit your imagination. So I think for a number of reasons, scientists are trained to be really shitty writers. And they know an awful lot, but it's kind of an incrustation around them that perhaps limits their imagination. So I think the cool thing, might be, is if you're brought up scientifically, you have a scientific training, but you don't focus on your own field of expertise. You focus on someone else. So you have a respect for the scientific method, but you are not hamstrung by all the reasons why your cool scientific idea won't work, because you just know every time you try and introduce an innovation, you can think of 10 reasons why, according to the current model, it won't work. And, if William Gibson had known anything about computer science, we would never have had Neuromancer, and arguably we might not have even had the Internet as we understand it today.
And that's interesting, too. And then when we're talking about putting pen to paper, it's kind of like I talk to a lot of people in the law field, lawyers, et cetera, and they have a hard time getting away from legal terminology when they're trying to write. And I think that's probably the same idea, is that you're not writing for colleagues, you're writing for people who read, just, again, as a lay person, that type of thing. So, yeah, it's really important that you kind of do, I guess, come back to earth in a way. But one of the things I wanted to get back to on the things is, you talked about the Howard Hawks version. You talked about the John Carpenter version. Did you ever read the Who Goes There, origin, where it started, obviously?
Yeah, no, I did. I mean, it came out in, 38, 36?
Yeah, it's old. It's old, yeah.
I mean, it was of its time. And John W. Campbell was kind of notoriously human-centric. It was like, Asimov would complain because, he couldn't ever write about aliens for John W. Campbell without the aliens getting their asses kicked by the humans in one way or another. But it was I haven't read it since the late 70s, so I'm really going back. my impression was that it was pulpy and it was purple and it was like somebody trying to do a bad Doc Savage imitation, but the idea was still damn good.
Absolutely, and it spawned so many things, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, something doesn't have to be well written to be viral. I mean, hell, look at Philip K. Dick. Can you name a science fiction author who has had more big budget Hollywood movies based on his stuff? And
it's funny you mentioned that. Ray Nelson
his prose was just awful.
You make a good point.
The word friendlily appears on the first page of Blade Runner. I think at one point he says that, the hover car purred throbbingly. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that would get him into remedial creative writing if he tried to take a course, and yet the man is an absolute giant in the field just on the basis of his ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, we actually interviewed Ray Nelson once upon a time, who wrote 8 o'clock in the morning, and, he talked about Philip K. Dick and a lot of things about that, how his prose was just not exactly the thing that he was known for, but, his stories created so many, things that spawned off of that. A question for you about the things that I'm really curious about, because it's one of those things where it's so open-ended. It's a story that's open-ended. We don't know how it eventually ends or what happens, and just like the movie. Do you have any regrets about just anything in there? Is it something that you feel is complete, or is this something that you would love to do a prequel, a sequel? You know what I mean? I know it's kind of wrapped up in its own way, but I was just curious if this is something you would ever want to expand upon.
Well, I'd certainly like to recapture lightning in a bottle. I don't know if it's possible. I think it was kind of its moment. It was inspired by that one paper. It was I honestly didn't know if it was any good when I finished it. It was really kind of an experiment. It does work, I think, on its own on a number of levels, but you get so much more out of it if you're familiar with the source material, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I could see myself, going back and doing, Helter Skelter from the point of view of Charlie Manson, or, Creature from the Black Lagoon from the point of view of the Creature from the Black Lagoon, but that gets old real fast. I was inspired, Travis, to do this. It was just kind of this would be so cool. And I can't see myself, and that's happened to me a number of times, but I can't see myself going back to The Thing, much as I love the movie, and trying to do it turns out MacReady was alive after all, and they thought him out, and I don't know. I mean, there's just so many ways to go, but as you pointed out yourself, the ambiguity of the ending is a lot of what gives it its nihilism, and that nihilism is utterly earned. I mean, you have two beings, and you don't even know you don't even know if they're human, sitting there just basically saying, Jesus, dude, that was a good fight. I'm not knowing who's won. And to go beyond that canvas, you're going to have to say who's won. And I think that would kind of cheapen, it would kind of do to The Thing what the Matrix 2 and 3 did to the first Matrix. It took something that was actually kind of a brilliant idea and cheapened it in hindsight to the point where you probably would lose your appreciation for the first one, having been contaminated by the second.
You make an awesome point there, because I agree. I loved the first Matrix, and then I saw the other two, and I was like, you know what I mean? Now I don't really want to watch the first one anymore because it was cheapened. So it's just kind of in the back of my mind now.
At the end of the second Matrix, I thought they'd redeemed themselves. I was unimpressed by the Matrix Reloaded, I guess it was called. Mm-hmm. And then at the end, it's like, Neo's capable of suddenly doing this stuff outside of the Matrix. And it's like, how did you do that? And he's, geez, I don't know. And that's pretty much the end of the movie. And I thought, oh my God, this is brilliant. They're still in the Matrix and they don't know it. It's just another level of the Matrix layered over on top. And the place in the core of the earth and all that stuff, it's just another simulation. And that's how he can do this stuff, because he's still just screwing with the code. But no, he was just the Messiah. and it wasn't nearly as subtle as I gave it credit for. Yeah, it kind of disappointed me. I mean, the first movie, I wasn't too keen on the love conquers all aspect of it, but everything else I thought was really. Oh, also the whole we're going to use the heat from your brains as a power source was kind of breaks physics if you think about it for more than half a second. But apparently they were forced to do that by the producers who thought that the idea of using brains as essentially motherboards to run the AI on would be too complicated for your average moviegoer. So they basically forced them to do something stupid, is what I understand anyway.
That happens so often too. Producers meddle in movies, and then things get worse and not better because of it. But that's just kind of, I suppose, the business from what I understand. But last thing on the things. One thing that I had noticed is, I'm looking around. I'm trying to see who's talked about the things and all these things. And again, the first time that I had heard of the things, Kate Baker was doing the reading of it. I noticed on YouTube there are a lot of people who have done the reading on the things. And so obviously it's really popular in this community. Have you listened to any of these readings? I know you've done some readings of it. I don't know if you've read the full story and recorded it, but I know other people have. So it just kind of tells me of the popularity of the story.
Oh yeah, no, it's got, it's been translated into about 15 languages. There's this guy, actually he was he co-wrote the screenplay for 28 Weeks Later, who made this really wonderful kind of interactive PDF of the things that you sort of scroll through this document, and it's this satellite map of Antarctica that morphs and changes as you read through the story. There's been a lot of there's been some great fan art. It's been very gratifying, especially since at the first I didn't think it was going to get published at first. The first guys we sent it to, or it was commissioned for. Don't remember who. I think it may have been Jonathan Strahan, but I'm only saying that because he publishes a lot of my stuff. Wanted to buy it, but the contract basically says we indemnify the publishers, and if Universal comes calling on us for copyright infringement, you're on your own. And I was like, no, dude, I'm willing to take the risk on that if you want. I'm willing to share the risk, but I'm not willing to take it alone. You're planning on making money off of this story. You can damn well take some of the risk as well. And they couldn't come to terms to that. So they ended up not buying the story. And it was Neil Clark at Clarkesworld who finally did. And so far, it's been, 6-7 years, and so far, Universal has not come knocking at the door with their dead-eyed men in sharkskin suits. And I know for a fact that everybody who had anything to do with the thing actually knows about it because Simon Pegg forced everybody to read it. So, I mean, Lancaster obviously is dead now. But my understanding I got this, one of my proudest moments was getting this email from Simon Pegg where he basically went through this list of people he had told about my story, and these people were all the ones who were involved in making the original movie. So people involved in the original production know about the things, and nobody has sued me yet for copyright infringement. So I think that's a pretty strong case for fair use, wouldn't you?
I'd say so. And, the original story doesn't have a copyright, so there's always that to fall back on if needed,
I suppose it's pretty obvious, though, that I'm basing it on the movie.
Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. But, it is and again, I just want to say it's an awesome retelling of it, and I'd love to see it adapted in whatever form, but at the same time, I like the fact that it's, kind of in the form that it is. So it may be just like the movie. You can't touch it because it's good the way it is. But, yeah, I really appreciate you coming on, Peter. I tell you what, I could talk to you for a really long time, but I told you I was only going to keep you for 30 minutes. So I'll tell you what, how about we do this again sometime down the line? Does that sound good?
Hey, I'm totally on board for that.
Let me throw out your website, rifters.com.
At this rate, the next time you call, it could be like five years later, and I'll still be working on this stupid Norwegian fish opera. So I'll probably be in the mood for a break whenever you call.
Absolutely. Well, I tell you what, like I was going to say, I think you have a pretty big hand in the website rifters.com. It's really